America didn't see him coming. That's the part that still echoes. Not because he was invisible, but because he was visible in all the right ways. He stood in sunlight. He shook hands. He smiled for photographs. The monster wasn't hiding in darkness. He was rehearsing normal. And that rehearsal was perfect. The mask. Ted Bundy understood something about human beings that most people never consciously learn. We don't see others. We see the story we want them to fit into. He built himself as a character, every gesture calibrated, every tone measured. When he laughed, it sounded effortless. When he listened, he leaned in just enough. He mirrored posture, vocabulary, rhythm. People left conversations with him feeling oddly validated, like they'd been fully understood. That was his camouflage, not invisibility, familiarity. He didn't force trust, he invited it. And invitation is more powerful than threat. Inside, his private world had no witnesses. It was a sealed room in his mind, a place where empathy didn't function the way it does in most people. Psychologists would later debate diagnoses, motives, pathology, but labels never quite capture the experience of standing near someone who can imitate emotion without feeling it. Bundy didn't explode with rage. He operated with absence, an emotional vacuum disguised as charm. And vacuums pull things in. He didn't see victims the way others saw them, where the world saw daughters, students, friends, futures. He saw roles in a script only he controlled. People became shapes, possibilities, objects orbiting his need for dominance. Control was the center of everything. Not chaos, not impulse. Control. He studied behavior the way a chess player studies openings. He noticed how kindness lowers defenses, how sympathy overrides suspicion. A sling on his arm wasn't just a prop, it was a psychological key. It forced strangers into a helper role. Once someone accepts a role, they unconsciously commit to finishing the scene. That's how he guided them, step by step. No alarms, no cinematic struggle, just a quiet shift from public safety into private nightmare. And the terrifying part is how ordinary it looked from the outside. Two people walking to a car, one trusting, one performing trust.
The double life. The brain has a survival instinct that protects identity. Most people need to believe their world is coherent, that good people look good, and danger announces itself. Bundy existed as a contradiction to that instinct. He worked crisis hotlines, speaking gently to strangers in despair. He studied law, the architecture of justice itself. He dated. He attended social gatherings. He laughed in groups. And after those evenings ended, he carried a separate self into the night. There was no visible seam between the two identities, no dramatic transformation, no cinematic snapping point, just a door closing inside his mind and another opening. Psychologically, that compartmentalization is chilling. It suggests not a fractured mind, but an organized one. A personality capable of isolating horror from routine with surgical precision. He didn't feel chased by guilt. He felt empowered by secrecy. Each successful deception reinforced a belief. I am untouchable. And belief becomes behavior. Behavior becomes escalation. The addiction control is intoxicating. The first time changes a person. The second time rewrites them. By the third, the behavior isn't an event, it's a system. Bundy wasn't chasing a single act. He was feeding a psychological hunger that grew sharper with each success. He wasn't running from the law. He was running toward a version of himself that existed only in those moments of dominance. That's what made him escalate across states. Geography wasn't escape, it was expansion, a widening theater. Each new location proved he could outrun consequence, outthink institutions, outsmart patterns. He didn't just want to commit crimes. He wanted to defeat reality itself. And for years, it felt like he was winning.
The cracks. But the human mind, no matter how controlled, leaks. Arrogance is a symptom of prolonged success. Bundy's confidence mutated into overreach. He stopped seeing risk as real. He saw it as part of the performance. Escaping custody wasn't just survival, it was theater, proof of superiority. When he leapt from that courthouse window, it wasn't only a physical act, it was psychological declaration. You cannot contain me. But escapes are different from freedom. Each one tightened the narrative around him. The public fear grew teeth. The myth he built began to collapse under the weight of attention. His movements became erratic, his crimes less controlled. The careful architecture of his persona started to splinter. And splintering minds make louder mistakes. Florida wasn't calculated the way Washington had been. It was desperation wearing the mask of habit. The predator who once orchestrated silence was now surrounded by noise, media, manhunts, pressure. His internal order was decaying. When he was finally stopped, there was no grand finale, just exhaustion. The performance had run out of stage. The trial mirror. The courtroom forced Bundy into a role he couldn't fully script. He tried anyway. He smiled at cameras, cross-examined witnesses, treated proceedings like a debate club exercise. It was his final attempt to assert control, to transform judgment into spectacle. But the psychological mirror of the trial reflected something he couldn't charm away: permanence. Evidence doesn't negotiate. Survivors don't dissolve under charisma. Facts accumulate like gravity, and gravity always wins. The nation watched a man attempt to outtalk reality itself. What fascinated people wasn't just the horror, it was the confrontation between image and truth, between a face that looked safe and a history that wasn't. That tension unsettled America more than the crimes alone, because it forced a question nobody wanted to ask. How many masks do we pass every day? The silence after. When Bundy was sentenced, the fear didn't end instantly. Fear lingers. It seeps into habits. Locked doors, suspicion of strangers. Parents teaching children new rules about the world. His execution years later closed a legal chapter. It didn't close the psychological one. Ted Bundy became a symbol, not of evil as spectacle, but of evil as disguise. The realization that danger doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it asks politely for help. Sometimes it looks like the safest person in the room. That truth doesn't age. It sits quietly in the back of the mind, reminding society that monsters don't always live outside the system. Sometimes they study it, perfect it, and walk through it, smiling.